Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
David Aldridge, senior writer for The Athletic, Kurt Gowdy Award winner, Hall of Famer. David, great to talk, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, Craig. How are you?
I am doing quite well. Excited to talk some hoops with you. We have some Wizards hoops to talk about, and we have whatever these NBA playoffs are. Wild, wacky, mysterious, fun, all of the above. Let's start off with the Wizards, though. We actually spent quite a bit of time on this yesterday and looking at where they should be looking for their head coaching search. Whether it's the Mike Budenholzer type, whether it's, can they find the next Mark Daigneault type or the next Nick Nurse, if you think of him coming up in Toronto, more so than the second time around in Philadelphia. Do they take the wild card and a swing at a guy like JJ Redick? Is there like a coaching archetype that when you look at what the Wizards are right now that you think would be best at this stage of their build?
I don't think it's Bud, because Bud will have better options, frankly.
Sure.
Whether it's this cycle or after next year, he'll just have better teams to go to. He'll have his choice of top jobs, I think, going forward. So, look, from what they are and what they're trying to do, I just don't think it makes sense to hire anybody but a young development type guy that is going to be able to grow with the team. I mean, whether or not, how long they keep Kuzma or Jordan Poole, the players that are going to help the Wizards get to the next level and get back to being a contending team are all in high school right now. I mean, with the exception of Koulibaly. Like the rest of them, all of them are in high school right now. Maybe one or two of them are about to enter their freshman year of college or the college year equivalent, 18 to 19 if they're playing abroad. But, the roster that is going to be good is not here yet. So to me, I think you have to maximize the development and the improvement of the young guys on your roster. Again, Koulibaly's the first, but whether it's Kispert or Avdia, those other guys that could be a part of this thing going forward as well. To bring in a veteran coach that's going to say my way or the highway, or this is how we do things, and not be willing to grow or experiment or try things doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Are there names then that are the hot names around the league right now? Obviously, Brian Keefe is going to be one of those names and kind of fits that mold as a guy who's been a lifelong assistant. And then kind of amongst that group, how highly do you think the Wizards rate on the open jobs of where obviously we saw Adam Peters come to Washington and we're like, hallelujah, the Commanders are back in some sense because they got the number one guy. Where do the Wizards rank with Winger and Dawkins in charge and running things the way they are?
Well, there's not that many jobs available right now. It's just the Lakers, which are, again, at a different place than the Wizards are going to have a different group of candidates for that job. And then you have Charlotte and you have Washington. I think a lot of people around the league think Charles Lee's getting the Charlotte job. He's with Boston this year. Was with Bud in Milwaukee for several years, and moved on to Boston this year. Boston wanted him very badly, and is thought of as a great up and coming young head coach, and is going to be, highly sought after. I think that would be the type of guy I would think I would, if I were the Wizards, I'd certainly say, hey, can we get in on this? Is there any way we can get you to kind of look at our situation going forward as well? Because Charlotte is, essentially in the same boat as the Wizards are in terms of where their franchise is. Now, they do have two pieces that the Wizards don't have in Ball and Miller that are really good young players that you can think you can build around. But they're not so much further ahead of where Washington is that I think it would be ridiculous for them to try to go after someone like that. So that, to me, is a guy that is the type of guy that I would be going after, that I would be looking at. I'm sure some people think they should go after Darvin Ham now that he's available, since he was the finalist last time before they hired Wes Unseld Jr. And, I would not dismiss that out of hand. I think, you know, whatever mistakes Darvin Ham made in with the Lakers this year, they don't disqualify him from ever being a head coach again. I mean, it's one of the things, Craig, that's interesting is that we allow players to make mistakes all the time when they're young. We expect them to make mistakes, but we don't extend that same grace to young coaches. You know, we don't ever say, well, this guy's in his first year as a head coach. He's not going to be perfect. He may make some mistakes. He may do things incorrectly. And instead of saying, okay, well, let's grow with that. Let's let him coach through those mistakes. We fire them, you know, and it just speaks to a kind of, and that's the job. I get it, hired to be fired, but I just think it's kind of short-sighted if you have a young guy that you want to grow as a coach as your team grows, while you wouldn't allow them that same ability to make mistakes that you allow your young players.
Totally. And it's the kind of thing where if I'm a JJ Redick, for instance, I'm just going to use JJ because he's the biggest name that everyone knows. Like, I want to go to a place like Washington as opposed to Los Angeles, where they're like, we got to win right now. And if you're here, you probably have a 5-year window and you're like, I will be allowed to make mistakes because the pressure is not so intense. And it's also the kind of thing that I wonder for the Lakers. We talked about this with Spiro Ditas earlier in the week. Milwaukee's kind of been in this situation with some of their decisions. The Lakers, how much are you limiting your own talent pool to pull from if you've got coaches thinking like, I can't make any mistakes? Obviously, the upside you see, you got a championship level roster, but is that a place I want to go if I'm going to be written off forever if I get fired after 2 years? Well,
I mean, Exhibit 1 is Adrian Griffin, right? It's 30-11. Got fired. You know, like, look, you can rationalize it any way you want for whatever reason you want. But if I'm a young coach, you know, trying to go to that pressure cooker, and you know the deal, whether it's especially with the Lakers, with LeBron's situation, is that your standard is win a championship. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no other level. There's not, well, you know, we'll roll with you for 3 years and grow, let you grow. It's like you got to be ready to win a championship if you go there, and if you don't, you're going to get fired. And that's what we found out in Milwaukee and in LA this year. So yeah, I mean, it certainly limits the pool of coaches that are willing to do that, because a young coach isn't going to get paid, and a veteran coach is going to want a whole lot of money to come there and be in that pressure cooker right away. I mean, that's high expectations. You're going to want to get paid for that. And Monty Williams has raised the bar for every coach, right? You know, so his contract kind of changed the paradigm a little bit in terms of what people will be willing to pay for head coaches. So, it's definitely not there. That's a closed shop in terms of not many guys are going to be willing, even at big money, to go into that type of situation.
Not to get too sidetracked by the Lakers, as David Aldridge is our guest, but real quick, DA, like, is Pelinka on the hot seat out there? Because I think it's so easy to look at what's happened there, and there's obviously many things that have gone wrong, and wrong is also a relative term. Like, they were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and if you don't have LeBron James, that's a great season. If you're not the Lakers, that's a great season. But there's definitely been more than questionable roster management. Is Ham going to be the fall guy and the only one here, or are there more changes potentially being bantied about in Los Angeles?
I don't get any sense that Pelinka's in trouble. You know, I would say if Pelinka were in trouble, that would be an indictment of ownership out there, because, you know, Jeannie Buss and the Buss family okayed everything he did last year. And in full disclosure, I did too. I thought running it back made a lot of sense. So keeping Austin, you know, and not trading some of their other players, whether it's Rui or D'Angelo Russell or some of the other guys, I kind of thought made sense, because to your point, they were in the Western Conference Finals last year. Like, so why wouldn't you bring that group back for another run? They didn't have a ton of injuries this year. They had some. You know, Gabe Vincent being out, I think, really hurt them more maybe than we all understand. But they didn't. Most of their rotation guys played a lot of games, so it just didn't. it didn't work. And Darvin has to take a lot of blame for that. I don't think he's blameless, certainly. I think he has to take a lot of blame because the rotations were all screwed up all year. But they wound up playing the exact same team they played last year. It was a pretty good team until 3 days ago. We all thought was the defending champ and was almost invulnerable, right?
Right.
So that's how sports goes. That's how the NBA goes. You are the undisputed baddest man in the world until Buster Douglas knocks you out, and then you're not. And that's how sports goes, And so it just is how it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But to answer your question, I think Pelinka's in good shape out there.
All right. David Aldridge with us here on the Hoffman Show. And I agree. Like, once you make it to where they did last year, it's just, how they got to that point and whatever. But again, I don't want to get too sidetracked by the Lakers discussion. Speaking of the formerly biggest, baddest bully on the block, we can circle back to them in a moment. But let's focus on the team that proverbially punched them in the face. I was very dismissive of the T-Wolves because the way, like the demeanor, the everything of Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert's playoff history just told me, like, yeah, we've seen this script before. I know Anthony Edwards is different and growing and is reaching a new level, but I don't know that he can overcome all of the other stuff. Boy, was I wrong on that one, David. Is that the biggest difference here, or has there been a shift beyond the greatness of Anthony Edwards that has propelled the Minnesota Timberwolves to where they are, which is, in the eyes of many, title favorites at this point?
Well, it starts with Ant. I think he's playing at a different level than even last year, and he was at a very good level. But there's other things going on, too. I mean, you have to remember last year, Minnesota played without Naz Reid, who was injured, and then the last game of the regular season, Jaden McDaniels broke his hand punching a wall in frustration. And those are two huge parts of their rotation that are now playing and are now available. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is playing at a high level this year. So their rotation is longer, both in terms of number of players and in terms of size, than it was last year, and that is creating incredible amounts of disruption. They are doing an incredible job of really not just defending Denver, but really kind of getting in their heads a little bit. I was telling somebody today, this is kind of like watching a football defense, like watching the Ravens defense in 2000, where they didn't just beat you, they kind of intimidated you a little bit, right? And so Denver played intimidated. They played scared yesterday. They got frustrated. They got Jamal Murray throwing a heat pack from the bench. Michael Malone, charging the floor, trying to get teed up. That's just not what a defending champion is supposed to look like. And it was a testament to the Wolves. The Wolves made them do that, so you have to kind of give them credit for that level of defensive intensity that they caused the defending NBA champion that had just destroyed the Lakers. They made them look timid at home. And that's unusual. But it was warranted because that's how hard and how effective Minnesota was defensively. And again, it comes back to they can run 6, 7, 8 guys out, and the only one of them that's under 6'5" is Mike Conley, the point guard. Everybody else is 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", and they're long and they're athletic and they just keep coming at you, and they're just playing at a really, really high level defense. But look, they've been the number one team in defense all year in the league. They're the best defensive team in the league. It's not an accident. But for them to do it against a team as potent as Denver is really eye-opening.
Yeah, and they were, middle of the pack offensively, the number one offensive team in the playoffs so far. And I heard on Zach Lowe's pod, I was listening on the way in today, they are the only team that has a higher effective field goal percentage in the playoffs than they did in the regular season. So we're seeing this team just peak and blossom at the right time. A team that, like the team that they are beating up, was built by Tim Connelly, now the president for the Nuggets, or for the Timberwolves, who obviously, as you know, DA, but just for the audience, used to run and be the general manager of the Nuggets, and a guy that was crushed when he made the Gobert trade. Because for the first 2 years, that looked like a colossal mistake. But what do you think Connelly knew in hindsight? And also, what has he done to make himself right, if you will, in hindsight, that none of us who criticize, or just at least we're looking with kind of a side eye at that deal, were thinking about at the time?
Well, I think a lot of teams in the league are looking at size again. I mean, we talked a lot about positionless basketball and downsizing and playing small and all that, but I think you're seeing the pendulum swinging back now to, hey, we got to be bigger to compete. Like we have to, we can't just have 6'5" guys out there. Like we have to have length. You have to have long arms. You have to have guys that can contest defensively and give second effort and those things. And Oklahoma City's doing it. Minnesota's doing it. Denver does it with its starting lineup. It doesn't have much coming off the bench in terms of size, but they got longer, in their starting five. And that's what the Wizards aspire to bring it back to Washington. I mean, they're just so far from being there, but that's why they took Coulibaly, because they said, look, this guy's got length. He's got real positional length. And is 18 years old, so the hope is he gets longer and taller, right? He might have one more growth spurt left in him, the same way Giannis added a couple of inches after he was drafted. And so that's, teams are doing that. I think again, we talked about this earlier about, making mistakes and being allowed to grow through those mistakes. I think last year, Rudy was not good. He just wasn't very good. And part of it was new system, new teammates, new expectations after being in a very kind of familiar, comfortable setting in Utah for all of his career, right? And so you have to allow that maybe it takes a guy, even a veteran, maybe it takes him a year to get comfortable in a new situation with new teammates. And now he looks comfortable. And they have, also last year, you got to remember, not just Naz Reid being hurt, but Karl Anthony Towns missed most of last season with an injury, that he suffered here in Washington, actually, early in the season. So he's been healthy most of the year. I mean, health matters. It's the most important predictor of success in the playoffs to me is how healthy is your team, compared to the other team. And I'm not taking anything away from Minnesota at all because they've been the better team the first two games. But it's clear Jamal Murray is limited with his calf injury. He just can't go. He can't do the things that he normally would do out there on the floor. So he is just much less of a threat offensively than he normally would be when he's healthy. And that's just reality. It's not an excuse. It's reality. And that doesn't, again, if Minnesota winds up going all the way and winning the title, they earn the title. They're the best team. But you do have to factor in that they played a somewhat diminished Jamal Murray in the second round.
For sure. And, hey, Denver won it last year in part thanks to the aforementioned series against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. LeBron was not 100% with his foot, and that is the nature of the league every single year. It's so interesting, DA, because we see the length and everything you're saying makes a total sense. And then there's Jalen Brunson at 6'2", suddenly scoring 40 points every night. And it's just absolutely amazing to watch that man work. And the fact that the Knicks' plan, the oversimplified version is, hey, this guy's really good. He won a championship in college with these two other guys that are also in the league and pretty good. Let's get them together and see what they can do. But it really does feel on given nights that Villanova 3 is just able to do what they do in the NBA. And I think it speaks to kind of, we talk about the through line of everything we've talked about here being comfortability and growth and the ability to make mistakes and evolve over time. A guy like Gobert, I think actually one of your colleagues at The Athletic wrote a great piece about like some of the neurological training that Gobert has done. And
absolutely,
as a veteran, like he got better. But when you see the chemistry of those three guys in New York, is that really the key, or is that a nice storyline and there's other things happening there that maybe aren't as obvious?
I mean, look, certainly those three are playing at a very high level. I mean, Josh Hart is just relentless attacking the glass. He just has it. This is what Barkley looked like when he played, when he was young. There's just some guys that just go get the ball. This is what Rodman did. He just went and got the ball. Like there's no teaching or, there's no program. There's just some guys that are wired to, there's the ball, I'm going to go get it. And Josh Hart just can do that. You can put a body on him. I thought Indiana did a great job in the first half. He still wound up with 15 rebounds. He just gets every rebound when it matters. And it's amazing to watch him. DiVincenzo, Golden State had him. Sacramento had him. He's been on good teams before. And this just seems to be a better fit. For whatever reason, it seems like a much more natural fit. And Brunson is Brunson was great in Dallas. They screwed up royally by not re-signing him. It's just a colossal error on their part, and getting absolutely nothing for him. He just walks as a free agent. It's a total screw up. Now they made up for it by getting Kyrie, but he's incredibly hard to guard, Craig. I thought Philly did a great job against him in the first two games of that series. And then after that, when he figured out what they were doing, he just went into a different place. And he never gets sped up. He never gets rattled. They were very physical with him, and he just kind of figured it out. He knows how to draw fouls. He's very good at it. And he can score at all three levels. He's so good in the mid-range. He's so good coming downhill. He's got the Chris Paul move mastered where he gets you on his hip and then he just stops and you run into him. He's crafty. He's strong. He's just a really, really good player playing at an incredibly high level right now. And he's only 6'1". I'm not saying there's no room for small guys in the league, but you have to be elite, I think, and he's elite to play at his size in this league.
For sure. David Aldridge, the Hall of Famer, with us for one more minute here. And I'm going to lean on your years of covering the league and see if I can dip into some story time with DA here, because you mentioned Josh Hart. And Hart was asked, I don't know if you saw this, David, but about a week ago about his nutrition. And he apparently is basically fueled by Mike and Ike's, the candy. He said, everyone else's face on the box, no, that's all mine. Maybe. I drink a lot of caffeine before the game. I can say that. 300 to 400 milligrams, Mike and Ike's. And then I'm ready, let's go run around. The nutritionist, Erica, we have fights. What's your best pregame nutrition wacky story you've heard of a player in your 25, 30 years of covering the NBA?
Oh, well, there's always been guys who had unusual training methods. Look, Rod Strickland is famous when he was here for eating hot dogs and hamburgers and all kinds of terrible stuff before games and still going out and getting 10 assists. Gary Payton's meals were different. Maybe more of the liquid variety, and he went out and did great. Iverson stayed out all night and came in and play, and would play great. There's just some guys that are wired a little differently and can handle that kind of atypical, let's say, training table methods that most guys would not be able to handle very well. Darrell Armstrong, I remember back in the day, he used to drink tons of coffee before the game, like tons of coffee, and so there's just guys that can do that and still go out and play. It's weird. It's not for everybody, obviously, but there's been many guys in this league that kind of do it a different way than would be recommended for a professional athlete, but they still get it done.
Yeah, no, I think it's hilarious that he's like, Erica and I get in fights. I bet. But hey, it works. He's out there playing Tibbs minutes, and he's able to sustain it. So good for Josh Hart. David Aldridge, are you covering anything in particular? You just kind of taking it all in from home. What can we expect? Click on your tab on The Athletic.
I'll be in Minnesota this weekend.
Nice.
I'll be in Minnesota this weekend for 3 and 4, and obviously writing off of that series. And, it's a great story. I'm happy for the people out there. And it should give, and I say this parochially, in the last 5 years, 2 of the worst teams in the league historically, Minnesota and Sacramento, have become 2 of the better teams in the league. So there's hope for for the forlorn Wizards fan base. It is possible to turn the thing around.
Yeah.
If you get lucky in the draft. It's possible.
And that's the thing, DA. I think when the year Anthony Edwards came out, no one was like, oh, man, Minnesota, great year to have the number one pick. It doesn't matter how deep the draft is. You got to get yours right.
Every draft, including this one, which everybody says, oh, it's not very good. Look, in every draft, there are 4 or 5 guys that become stars. Every single one. You got to pick them. This is the job of Michael Winger and Dawkins going forward. Is they got to find that guy in this draft, and then they got to find him again in the next draft, and then they got to find him again in the 26th draft. That's their job. And if they do that, then the rebuild could be a lot shorter. But you can't sit back and go, "Well, it was a bad draft. We couldn't." No, you got to pick. You got to find a guy that's special in this draft.
Yep, and we'll find out Sunday. Draft lottery. We'll see how high their selection is.
Yep.
David, always appreciate your time. So generous with it during a busy time of year. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Craig. Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.